Welcome to Faith Speaks and Around Town. I'm your host, Dick Patton. It's a pleasure to welcome you back. And here we are during the week of Easter and getting ready for a festive weekend. And also, too, we've got my special guest today, of course, Father Reverend Jason Wells, the president of the New Hampshire Council of Churches. And we started a series with him that he's done before about preparation and death and dying and all that. And, you know, many people don't have anything put down in paper or what their final wishes would be. And so today we're going to continue on with that. And it's almost appropriate where it is Easter and with Jesus dying on the cross, but still, I mean, many of us, it's a morbid subject in many eyes, and who wants to talk about that, you know, I mean, and the first thing I ever came in touch was when my grandparents passed, my grandfather first, my maternal grandfather, and of course the funeral director came to the house. He was an older man, he owned Boutwell Funeral Home, which at that time was on North Main Street. And, you know, it was a scary subject. I mean, you know, the body was there and it's still in the bedroom. And, you know, it's like, ugh, spooky. But, and for my grandmother, here she is at 80 years old. And, you know, it was tough to have to sit there and at that moment make out. So that the next day they went down to the funeral home and picked out, you know, the casket and all that, but it is a tedious job if you don't really know what you want, and the prices have gone up, obviously.
Right. So thank you for the invitation to come back.
Oh, I
it's
appreciate that.
Good to be together. It is notable that we are, as we are recording and talking, it is Wednesday in Holy Week, so we're about to be on the edge of Good Friday. Where we commemorate the crucifixion of Jesus and his resurrection on the third day, on Easter Sunday. And of course that always puts us in a certain frame of mind. We're thinking the most weighty and central aspects of what it means to be a Christian. But we're put in mind of the fullness of our Christian hope. That by faith in Jesus Christ, by faith in the blood of the cross and the empty tomb on Easter Sunday, that we ourselves, through that faith, will enjoy eternal life. And notably, if we bring that back to this conversation around death and dying, there is the reminder, I think later on in the scriptures in the New Testament, Paul says that as Christians, as people who are faithful in Jesus, that we do mourn, we grieve when there's losses, loved ones who are lost, but we do not mourn as those who are without hope. That our hope in resurrection, it gives a new flavor, a new kind of perspective to grief and mourning. And I think that does point out that we should have a certain ability to be confident in planning for our own death. I think, Dick, you were suggesting that many people avoid it. We find it unpleasant to think about personally, or even if we can think about it personally, it's hard to talk to our families about it. It's hard to talk to our spouses or our children, to our own parents about those things. They're uncomfortable conversations. But I encourage churches to have these conversations. You can have them in your parishes or in your congregations. When I served Grace Episcopal Church in East Concord, I was there for 10 years, and every couple of years we would do a class that we called Death and Dying. And we would encourage people to come together while they are well, while they're healthy, to think these kinds of questions through. Because you're right, when the time of crisis comes in a family, even under the best of circumstances, there are many decisions to make. You will go to the funeral home and they will present you with more questions than you imagine possible about how you want to be buried, how you want the graveside to go, how do you want a reception to be after that, what are you going to do about writing an obituary. And how will you publish that? And there are many questions, and the more you can prepare for them now, the more, I think we said last time, the more it is a gift to your family, because you've helped them answer those questions for them. You're giving them a gift in that way.
Yeah.
And actually, what I think we didn't say last time, to go a little further, is it's a fantastic way for you yourself to know, first of all, just to have that peace of mind that comes from answering the questions ahead of time. But it does ensure, in a way, that we will have the funeral that we want for ourselves. I remember you had said, the specific, you want certain Christmas music played at your funeral. People want to have a certain music or a certain message presented. As a pastor in a church, I often worked with folks, I pastored people who were older. And they knew that their children or their grandchildren were not churchgoers anymore. That they were very faithful, but their family was not. And sometimes when we'd have these kinds of classes and discussions, people would say, well, I don't know what's going to, if I left this to my grandkids to plan my funeral, I don't know that I would have the funeral I want to have. That I want to have my faith noted in a particular way. Or I want certain music or Bible stories read. And that's why I want to write this stuff down now and make sure they know where it is, so that I can have that part of my life honored, my faith life honored.
Well, especially if you don't have kids, like I don't have children.
Right.
I have a sister. I have cousins. Most of them I don't see, and my wife did. But it's very difficult, and I know what I want. And of course, I'm not even going to be here to see it. Although I guess maybe, luckily, my ghost spirit might be looking down. But basically, I'm just trying to take that load off somebody's mind to relieve them of that pressure. Because, when my mother was bad in the hospital, my father was so mad. Oh, was he mad at me? Because I went ahead and made the preliminary arrangements. And because she was not good that week, but then she made a recovery or it was just whatever. But she lasted for another month, and she was very good during that time. But still, it scared us. So I said, well, maybe I'll go up and meet with the director, and because they got new people up there at Bennett's, and so we sat, and it took probably a good 3-4 hours. When you start to go through everything, from what you want to wear. If you don't have clothing for an elderly person, they do. It's odd, but they do sell clothes for a man or a woman. And who do you have for bearers? And how many bearers do you want? And then you get the tour of the room where all the caskets are, and that's morbid.
But it can be, but usually that it's hard to have those decisions made when the emotions are running high. You're already grieving for the loss of a family member, in some ways, it's hard. It's just hard to make those decisions. It's hard to make them on the spot when there's maybe a time limit for how quickly the plans have to come together. And when you're in a more sort of relaxed state of life, if you're maybe at a church gathering where you're doing a class together, you can talk about these things about, well, if I were to think for myself about, well, what kind of coffin do I want to be buried in? And I actually find most of the time, people say for themselves, they want something very simple. Give me the pine box. I hear that a lot. Give me the simplest arrangement. I don't want anything fancy. And that reflects something about our values and the way we look at our own lives. Now, if you're at the funeral home and you have 10 minutes to make a decision about somebody you are very grieving about in the moment, you probably wouldn't choose that for them.
No.
You would choose something else that maybe is much more expensive. It may not be something you can afford easily. And it may not be quite what that person wanted. And that's why I want these conversations to happen. I found both times that I ran that class, if a church or a parish wants to run this kind of a class, We had you can call up Bennett Funeral Home, Waters Funeral Home, Wendell Butt, who's out toward Boscawen, if that's where your parishioners are. They're more than happy to come to a church and talk about the kinds of questions that they would ask you, and you can start having those conversations right now, which is a much better time to have them. Another group to be in touch with. To get away from sort of the practicalities of planning a funeral itself, are the visiting nurse associations. Here in the area, that's the CRVNA, Concord Regional Visiting Nurse Association. That they are often, that toward the end of life, they are there to perhaps come to your home when you're homebound, or to be there for hospice care at Hospice House at Concord Hospital or other places. And they have workers and chaplains who are very skilled. They're specially trained on the kinds of conversations you have at the end of life, the kinds of decisions that have to be made. I think last time we spoke a little bit about the legal decisions that have to be made, the medical decisions that have to be made about when do you want hospice care? When do you want to go to that palliative care? When do you choose to go off of certain treatments and choose only things that bring you comfort? And again, you run into a lot of faith questions there about what treatments do you want withheld? What treatments do you want to have? But they're skilled at not pushing you to a decision, but asking about what your faith is and how do you want to think about those? Should you write those plans down? Again, that's a time of life that I find, as a pastor, being able to be a part of. Those are deep, they're meaningful, and they're sacred. To be able to be a pastor in the room while somebody's in their last days. You have deep conversations, and sometimes people are not. They're not 100% lucid. Maybe they're on medication, or maybe they're just nearing an end stage of life. People speak in symbolic ways. They know they're leaving the world, and they speak in deep ways. I remember sitting with a woman who her memory was going, her cognitive capacity was going, and she was doing something with her fingers the whole time, just kind of rubbing her fingers, to her thumb across her fingers.
Yes,
I asked her.
I've heard that.
And I just kind of innocently asked her, "So, what are you doing?" And she was holding nothing in her hands, but she said she was darning socks. She was. I don't know what was quite in her mind. And she was She thought she was fixing a pair of socks, and it was a wonderful conversation that we had following that. That was about, before she leaves this world, she was imagining herself tying up the loose ends. Right? She was trying to mend something before she could leave, and you could have a deep conversation. It was very symbolic, and it was a very faith-filled conversation. But it cannot happen at almost any other stage of our lives.
I don't know if you're familiar with this or not, and maybe Brian will remember this, but it seems like the city of Concord approved of a way of burial at one of the cemeteries, I think Blossom Hill, where a section of the woods, they can bury them just as, I would guess, like in the pioneer days. Dig a hole and that's it. I don't know if I remember. What are they called? Green burial or something?
There's sort of eco-friendly forms of burial.
Something. And you, I don't think you can if you put a stone out there, or if you just, or what. But it seemed, if I remember them talking about this and approving it, and I thought, I gotta find out. Not that I'd want it, but I mean, it'd be kind of, well, I wouldn't say gross, but to walk out in the woods and all of a sudden step in a hole or something and there's a body laying there or something. I mean, really.
I don't know specifics on that, but I've heard of that. I haven't heard of that specifically in terms of Blossom Hill Cemetery, but that may be true. But I've heard of that movement that people are moving towards. More and more people are starting to choose that sort of green or eco-friendly burial. So I think that would involve that the body would not be embalmed in a certain, because the chemicals that are used in that would not be used, which means usually that the burial happens very quickly after death. Or that there are not the concrete vaults in the ground are, I think, not used.
They're not used, no.
And so there's different caretaking that happens, but that is an excellent kind of question that you can ask to someone from Bennett or Waters.
Yeah,
and they can tell you what's available at what cemeteries. Because people do want to ask those kinds of questions about when I want to be buried. This is one of those things that I always encourage people to write down of, do you want to be cremated or not? Some people say yes, some people say no, some people have faith reasons not to be cremated. For a long time, Catholic teaching was against cremation, and there was always sort of that Christian witness that our bodies will be resurrected, and that cremation was seen as a sign of a denial of the resurrection of our actual bodies. So there may be faith reasons to choose one or the other, but I know when you're talking about your faith and your values, a connection to creation and to can be very important to people. So it's an important question to raise.
Yeah, I mean, I remember reading that in the paper, and I thought, ugh. But I thought, now I'm gonna have to check with City Hall about that. But no, it's a tough time, and of course there's an ad on TV where it shows this elderly lady in a hospital bed, and the daughter's sitting there talking to her, and she's saying about, well, I just made a phone call, and to make my final plans, and the daughter's saying, I didn't know you were thinking of making your final plans. Yes, I made one telephone call, and I'm good for $30,000 to cover my funeral and final plans. They didn't have to take a medical test or nothing. And I thought, and I've seen that ad so many times. It's like, oh, but yeah, it is. It's really things that people hate to think about. But and you're right. I mean, I've done it because, again, more I had worked in police work somewhat, but you know, even then, like I said, my father was so mad at me. Oh man, he wouldn't speak to me for weeks. But then he said, well, you did such a good job with your mothers. He said, I'd like the same thing for me. And of course, I had picked out the blue casket. It was like a light blue, and because my mother loved blue. Yeah. And when he said he wanted the same thing, and it was almost like a bluish green, I think, or more bluish or turquoise, or something like that. And I thought, well, that's what I want because of my love for the Michigan colors and Wolverines and amazing blue. But you know, but you can go. I think what it is, what I read when Kennedy was assassinated, how the First Lady Jacqueline spent all night with her aides, because nothing was planned, pouring through records of what they wanted and how they were going to do, and I can just sympathize what they had to go through. Right. And how simple what we have, but yet to us it's a monumentous decision. Yeah. Where most of us are not the Kennedys. No, it's not as complicated. But I think you've got raised some good points. And one thing that I encourage churches to do, as we plan a sort of multi-week series, was to have one of those weeks and to invite a lawyer to come. Yeah. And talk about some of the financial and legal questions. For an individual doing this, to find if you don't have a lawyer already, to find someone or call that person, because you can have a private, confidential discussion, and they can help you go through things like your life insurance policies if you have one. Yeah. Because many life insurance policies, I think, sort of like you were saying, will help provide for the cost of a funeral. They do, and what's there. And to talk about things like your will and powers of attorney and what will happen to your goods. I frequently quote, there's a song by George Strait, the country singer. And there's a line in one of his songs that says, I ain't never seen a hearse with a luggage rack. That no matter what we have, none of it is coming with us. There's no luggage rack on our hearse. So we do need those lawyers. There are lawyers who almost any lawyer can give you some guidance about a will.
there are some. I know of one attorney in Manchester, and she is Episcopalian. She's a Christian, but she deals a lot with almost primarily with elder law. She does law with older people, and specifically for these kinds of questions. So there are people you can invite to your church to kind of have that conversation. And what I encourage churches to do, this is good to do with your lawyer, which is to have all of that paperwork on file with them. Have a copy with your family, but to have a file, I had a file drawer in my office at the church. It was just an alphabetical file for people who did these plans, so that years down the road, we would have that ready. There'd be a copy of an obituary. There'd be maybe a copy of a will, a copy of some of those plans about I want to be cremated or not, or I want that eco burial. All those notes would be down, so that you don't have to do that sort of Kennedy family work. That it's all in one place. It's filed away, and it's taken care of.
Well, you can figure the cost of a funeral today compared to what it was back in the 40s, 50s, or 60s, And look how it's going to get worse as it comes along. You got to pay for not only the funeral home, the funeral director, the musician, or the organist, or if you come into the church, obviously you have to pay for the priest or the minister, and it all, and then you have to think about the food afterwards. Are you going to have some place to have a gathering and then the other thing is a lot of them now are not having calling hours like they used to have. It used to be 2 to 4, 7 to 9. Now they're just going from 5 to 8, 4 to 7, and something like that, and that's it. But it's really something. It's a lot to think about. And and then when you get to the time where all of a sudden something happens, or you get that telephone call, you think, oh, your mind is not even with it. You just have to think about it. I just feel like my sister; she wanted nothing to do with it. But thank goodness I had Dad's plans pretty much started. So I just had to finish up, with what I knew he wanted for hymns, and go from there. But and then who does the eulogies? Do you want anybody to do a eulogy? And
that is a good question, and I'm glad you brought that up, because thinking of eulogies is something that I have conversations with every family, because we plan a funeral service, help them sometimes plan what happens at the graveside, what happens with eulogies, and some of the other components that are there.
Yeah.
And there are some families for different ways that this happens, and some ways that people might want to think about it. People who are listening, sometimes we do like to. There's some places where it's been just marvelous that we do almost an open mic. That you just that it's the right situation. You just let anybody come up and say anything. There's a lot of trust given in those situations. That's not right for every family.
No.
I offered that, and some families will say, "Oh no," because as soon as if you open up that mic, we'll be here for 3 hours.
Yeah.
If you open up that mic, well, what about Uncle Jerry? He's going to get up, and I don't want Jerry to have the mic.
No.
Or some people will simply say, so we want to prepare. You want to think of 1, 2, or 3 people who you would like to have give that eulogy, to have that microphone for a short time. And sometimes it's just good to know from within the family, at the time of the funeral, because the emotions run so high.
Oh, yeah.
You can trust that Uncle Jerry. He's going to do it. He's going to do it for the whole family, and then the rest of us are kind of off the hook. That it's hard to get up and speak in public in good circumstances. It's extra hard to do that at a funeral for a loved one. So sometimes there's an obvious person in the family to think of who would be the best sort of family representative.
And then you've got the families that'll have a little bit of dissension, and you'll sit and talk to me, but then all of a sudden, Father or Reverend, can I talk to you? I don't want you dealing with him. I'm I'm the oldest daughter. I should be the one to deal with this. I talk to him. And all of a sudden, now you've got 2 or 3 into a little battle there, and it's like, oh boy. So.
Yeah, yeah. The emotions run high, and it's not. It doesn't only happen when the family's arguing about the will and the money that gets handed out, but is a problem for who gets to really represent this person's life, who gets to be there to speak for you, for the eulogy, or who gets to make those plans. And these kinds of things also happen around weddings when the emotions run high. They're momentous moments in the life of the family. And they're stressful, and that's why I do hope that, first of all, people reflect about this just personally and privately, write those kinds of things down. But also, I encourage pastors and parishes to have groups where you discuss these things and get the ball rolling with people, because it certainly helps the funeral director. It helps your pastor. If that person, when all of the family's going everywhere saying everybody wants to be in charge, they can point to that piece of paper and say, well, no, so-and-so's job is this or that. It lowers the temperature in the room when people are upset and grieving. And I mean, they're right to be upset and to be sad, but that helps can help smooth things out at a very difficult time in life. It is a gift that brings peace to not only you, because you took care of those plans, but it brings peace to your family later on. So those are important gifts to bring.
Well, we're getting to our close of Around Town, and Faith Speaks, and boy, that went fast.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, boy. But it is a very, very touchy, very personal subject, and so think about it. If you don't have your thoughts, your final plans, talk to your local pastor, your priest, or whatever, and certainly your lawyer, and get things down, at least down on paper, a rough draft, and go from there. So, with that in mind, thanks for joining us at Around Town. Thank you to my director there, Brian Blackton, and have a great Easter, great day, and we'll talk with you all soon on Around Town.
Happy Easter.
Happy Easter.